Back in 2021, I made a lot of deck decks, and they weren't very good. And Niv Mizzet Parun was one of my decks, and it's here. I can't believe it's been that long that I've had this deck. I love this thing. It's been upgraded immensely since then. Let's dive into it here. We got Niv Mizzet Parun, of course, the commander. Triples on the pips, blue and red. Can't be countered. Flying whenever you draw a card, deals 1 damage to any target. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery, you draw a card. So as you can imagine, this thing combos with a lot of stuff, including new Niv Mizzet, which is Niv Mizzet Visionary. So social control does non-combat damage with Visionary, which like Parun does the damage. This does something to draw a card. This thing triggers, right? Whenever you draw a card, deal 1 damage to any target. Boom, 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 boom. Infinite. Well, nigh infinite, as long as you've got cards in your library for it. But this deck has all 3 Niv Mizzets that you can run, and not the 5-color ones, but you've got the 3 2-color ones, and it will continue to grow as they probably will eventually keep making Niv Mizzet cards. Each of them is pretty similar, at least the first 3. Firemind, Draco Genius, and Parun are all very similar. They deal damage when you draw cards, basically. Slight variations on them, and some of them are better than others. And then Niv Mizzet Visionary we had just talked about. No max hand size, etc., and stuff. So these are the bread and butter of the deck. This deck, as you can imagine, has a lot of card advantage. There's 15 card advantage cards. Archmage Emeritus, there's a lot of instants and sorceries, so whenever you cast them, you draw a card with this. Brainstorm, look, it's cheap, look at the top 3, put 2 back in the top. Change of Fortune is actually pretty darn good. You could draw a bunch of cards in one turn, and then this allows you to discard your hand and then draw a card for each card you discarded. So you discard a massive hand and then just draw them all back, which triggers Niv Mizzet. Cool stuff. Consecrated Sphinx. If an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. Extra card draw there. Fairy Mastermind. Flash and Flying. Whenever opponent draws your second card each turn, their second draw card each turn, you draw a card. You can force people to draw cards as well. Finale of Revelation. This is, you draw X cards if X is 10 or more. Instead of shuffle your library or your graveyard into your library, and then draw X and then untap 5 lands. No max hand size the rest of the game. Bonkers. This thing's a game changer. Like especially at the end of the game after you've discarded your whole hand, right, with Change of Fortune. You just keep going and going and going. It's pretty cool as long as you got the mana for it. Lorien Revealed, Island Cycling, which could be important, or just draw 3 cards later in the game. This is a fantastic popper all-star. It's really, really good. Magus of the Wheel, it acts as a wheel, but on a creature. Sacrifice it, each player discards their hand and draws 7. It's fun. It kind of sits there and looms over people and they're like, oh no. But Teferi's Edge is just inside. If you draw a card except for your first one, you draw 2 cards instead. Again, can Niv Mizzet, you draw 2 cards, it's 2 more damage, and then blah 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 blah. Teferi's Puzzle Box, beginning of each player's draw step. That player puts the cards from their hand on the bottom of their library in any order, and then draws that many cards. So nobody will be safe. Everybody will always just have a different hand every turn, which could be maybe beneficial, but maybe not. I don't know. It's pretty. I just think it's fun. Time Reversal. This is great. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards. Great stuff. Rhystic Study, of course, draw extra cards, as it's unstable harmonics, right? But Rhystic Study. And then some more wheel effects, Winds of Change, Windfall, Wheel of Fate. Just discarding your hand, drawing either that many or 7 cards, depending on which version it is. Great for this kind of a deck. Next, we've got some Disruption that I've added to the deck to make it a little harder to get things going for other people. So we've got Grafdigger's Cage, so creatures in graveyards and libraries can't enter, and then players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries, which does not happen with the ones that's like shuffle your graveyard into your library, because you're not casting a spell from it, but it hurts like graveyard players. So this is actually pretty good for one mana. Ley Line of Punishment, of course, it enters in the battlefield for free if it's the first turn, or before the first turn. Players can't gain life. Damage can't be prevented, which works really well with Niv Mizzet. There you go. This is like, oh, kablam, kablam, you can't get rid of that damage. Narset, each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. It just sucks for them. But it's great for me because I'm going to draw a bunch of stuff. And then you can -2 Narset, look at top 4 of your library, reveal non-creature, non-land card from among them into your hand. Pretty solid. And then Silent Arbiter. I don't really want creatures attacking me, so well, I might want to swing with my Niv Mizzet at some point, but no more than one creature can attack each combat, and no more than one creature can block each combat, which is pretty fun and pretty funny for big old swinging token decks. Our finisher are the big ones here: Ophidian Eye and Curiosity, which is pretty much the same thing. Ophidian Eye has Flash, which is nice, but both of them say whenever an enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So, deal a damage, draw a card, deal a damage, draw a card, deal a damage, draw a card, right? Perpetual loop, gets things going. Dictate of the Twin Gods and Solfim, Mayhem Dominus. Each of these deals double damage. So, these are the real kickers, right? Every time you draw a card, you want Niv Mizzet to do 2 damage, which is pretty darn good. I believe Dictate of Twin Gods and Source will deal damage to a permanent or player, deals double that damage instead. So that is damage to us as well. But if we've got our combo pieces going, it's super hard to turn it off. So as long as we've got those going, and this has Flash, so we can put that out at any point. As long as we get the mana. And then Psychosis Crawler, power and toughness equal number of cards in our hand, which is really awesome. But then whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So you can imagine stacking all of these together, you're just losing life constantly. So it's like you draw a life, or you draw a card that each opponent loses a life, and then you get to ping somebody for 1. It's fun. These cards are pretty scary for people when they see them. Which means they're going to have answers for them, which means we need to have some interaction. 11 interactions here. So we got Archmage's Charm, which can counter a spell, or we can draw 2 cards, or we can gain control of non-land permanent mana value 1 or less. We'll probably counter a spell most of the time, I feel like, with this one, but it's flexible. Counterflux, again, we're going to counter some stuff, or each spell we don't control, which is awesome. Counter spell, of course. These are the versions of cards I have in my own personal deck. Yeah, there's a cheaper version, right? The one you saw on the thumbnail. This one's like $600 in my version, but the one on the thumbnail, right, is about $400. So anyway, Long River's Pull. There's just another counter spell that I'm probably eventually going to swap out for something more spicy. Right now, it basically asks as a counter spell as long as you promise gift. So there's that. Ionize, counter target spell, and then deal 2 damage to that spell's controller. So that's always fun. Fierce Guardianship, it's a free counter spell for non-creature spells. Mind Swipe is great. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X, and then it deals X damage to that creature's controller. What's fun is when they don't have any mana left and you just pay 3, or you just pay 1 mana as X, and you're just like, haha. This is just kind of cheeky. Misdirection. It's a free counter spell, or not counter spell, but you can change the target of a single spell by exiling a blue card from your hand. Pretty great. Reinterpret is a really cool card. 2 red, blue, or 2 blue, red, counter target spell. So it just counters it outright. You may cast a spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. So if you counter somebody's, Crater of Behemoth, let's say, that's a lot of mana. Now you get to cast something for free from your hand that's that or less. And that's like I said, that's a lot of mana. Always fun. Strict Serenade is the other swan song, right? Counter target artifact, creature, or planeswalker, and then they make a bird. And then Tail's End, counter target activated, triggered, or legendary spell. Activated ability, triggered ability, or legendary spell, right? These are very valuable. I don't think having too many of them is too valuable. You might be able to put 1 more in here, but I think I had like 4 at one point. I just couldn't do much with them because believe it or not, people don't have activated and triggered abilities too terribly often. I mean, they do have them a lot, but not as often as you'd think. At least is from my experience. Maybe it's different for you, but I was like, I'm going to take most of these out and just have the one. But it also counters a legendary spell, so that's very important for like commanders and stuff, just in case. Lands, right? We just got some basic lands. Well, basic lands on my heck. These are not the lands I have in my deck. Hold on, let me switch this, because that is not. These are not the lands. Zendikar. I have my favorite islands in here, which is the Bowl Island. Yeah, that's the actual version I have. Those and those. Anyway, we get the full art. Lotus Field is fun because even though you sacrifice 2 lands, it adds 3 mana of any one color, which adds to Niv Mizzet's pip, whatever. Some extra stuff here, right? Some great fun dual lands or whatever. All right, so some more value. We've got Born Upon a Wind. Cast spells this turn as though they had flash, and then we draw a card, which is fantastic. There's a bunch of sorceries up there, if you may have noticed, which makes this very valuable. Flare of Duplication. Sacrifice a non-token red creature rather than pay this mana cost if you want, and copy target instant or sorcery, and then you can pay or choose new targets. So just another misdirection, essentially. And then Jin-Gitaxias. We have no max hand size, and let's look at the wording, right? At the beginning of your upkeep, draw 7 cards, and then each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Which is really funny. I've only been able to play this once because it's 10 mana, but it really screwed everybody over. I'm pretty sure I won that game. It's fun. It is a Praetor, but it's 10 mana, so it's not coming out very often, but it is funny when it happens, at least for me. Celundi Vision, Sink into Stupor, and Sundering Eruption are all double-faced, so they all have the great lands on the back, which is always good, and then each of them acts as some sort of interaction spell, or I guess more value, right? Because it's either one. They're flex spots. Celundi Vision, look at the top 6, reveal an instant or sorcery among them, put them in your hand. It's kind of important getting through the top just in case you need something. Sink into Stupor returns a spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to his owner's hand, so you can get rid of something temporarily. Sundering Eruption destroys target land, and if you know what you're thinking, that's not good, but single land destruction I think is okay. There's a lot of weird lands that definitely need to be removed at certain points, right? And so I think single land destruction is perfectly fine as long as the whole deck's not that, because then it's kind of annoying if you're playing casual. Anyway, and then its controller may search for a basic into play tapped, and then creatures without flying can't block this turn. That part's really cool. And then Untimely Malfunction is kind of just another Abrade. It's like an updated Abrade, but it destroys an artifact, or it changes the target of a target spell with a single target. It's another misdirection, or one or more creatures can't block this turn, so that could be fun. Ramp, we've got Arcane Signet, Commander's Sphere, Gilded Lotus, again 3 mana, probably too expensive, but whatever. Is it Signet? You gotta have that in there. It's got Niv Mizzet on it. Lotus Bloom, there's another 3 for your mana. Moonsilver Key searches for any of these or a basic land. Solemn Simulacrum, it doesn't search for Solemn or this one, but it'll search for the other ones. Or not Wayfarer's probably other, but Solemn Simulacrum draws a card. This is important, and searches for land. Strike It Rich makes a treasure, and it's got flashback, so this could be fun. Talisman of Creativity taps for those colors of mana. Thought Vessel, no max hand size, and it's colorless. Wayfarer's Bauble searches for something, of course. Now we've got some removal, so we got a lot of interaction and a lot of removal because Niv Mizzet dies fast. So this whole point of this deck is just combo off. So Abrade, speaking of, we've got Abrade in here. 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. Abrade is surprisingly good in Commander. You wouldn't think it, but it's more versatile than you think, and it's an instant speed too, which makes it nice. Amphibian Downpour, makes something, or turns something into a 1/1 frog, but it also has flash and storm. So then it just like populates. You can just make a bunch of copies of this, which is just, oh, it's just bonkers. Storm is so broken. A bunch of people cast spells, you got a big stack going, and you're just like, oh, all your creatures are frogs. It's fun. It's a fun card. Devastation Tide returns all non-land permanents to their hands, and it's got Miracle. That's my budget replacement currently for Cyclonic Rift. I only have one, and it's in a different deck. And then we get Into the Royal. This one's probably dumb, but I don't know. I've always had this card in there because it returns a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if it was kicked, you draw a card, right? So you get some extra value from it. It's probably better things that I could put in here. I just haven't yet. Tormod's Crypt removes graveyards, or a graveyard. That's pretty good. And then Vandal Blast can destroy one or all artifacts that we don't control. Next, we got Tutors. There are 3 Tutors. Drift of Phantasms. It's got that transmute ability. Let me go back up here. Boop, so you can see the card. It's got that transmute ability. So you can discard it and then search for something with mana value 3, which is great. There's lots of things mana value 3 that could be very important. Ophidian Eye, for example, is the one we're probably going to go for. Micromancer searches for instant or sorcery mana value 1. Reveal it and put it in your hand. Again, there's lots of stuff, right? We got Vandal Blast. We got instants and sorceries here. We got mana value 1. It's exactly 1, which means you can get Strict Serenade, Vandal Blast. There's a wheel in here. Let's see. Where did it go? Oh my heck. This is a terrible, terrible thing. Winds of Change. Right, you guys are getting bored of me going through all these cards. Brainstorm. Anyway, there's a few things we can get. Again, I could probably switch that for something that's more effective, but I currently don't have the funds. So maybe eventually that'll get switched. Solve the equation, search for any instance or sorcery if frickin' Micromancer doesn't work. So there's that. All right, that's the deck. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments. And while you're down there, check out the TCGplayer affiliate link and the Manfred+ Proxies link as well. And make sure you join me next week for your weekly dose of magic.